You may have heard the myth that majority of Icelanders believe in elves and hidden people. Well, this isn't even remotely true.
There have been cases where roadwork companies rerouted a road around a rock with the added cost because some nutter said an elf lived in it, perhaps proving that many people will at least not rule out the possibility that elves exists. Just in case they get mad and try to murder you. But where did this belief in elves come from? There are 3 completely different origin stories for elves, one of which I find the most plausible. It's plausible because it involves a young man explaining to his friends why he didn't get laid, and I can relate to that. But I think the lie might have spiraled a bit out of control, eventually costing taxpayers millions of kronas in unnecessary roadworks. Let's start with the unlikely versions first.
And let's start with the one nobody talks about anymore, for reasons that should be very obvious.
One day Adam wanted to have sex with his hag of a wife Eve.
By the way, this is pretty direct translation from the source material.
But she was not interested in having sex that day, and turned her back on him, and Adam did not like that at all, so he walked away from her to a secluded area where he created a hole in the ground. Then he laid down on top of the hole and just put his man seat into it and covered it up. Okay.
I'm not doing that.
He then said that the men who would come from this act would be invisible to everyone except those who are more like him and less like his hag of a wife, and they would be useless.
There is so much to unpack here, but let's assume this is true, which we can all agree it's probably not.
Then that would mean that everyone who claims to see elves or hidden people are useless and cuckoo enough to have sex with a hole in the ground. Well, that would kinda make sense, I guess.
One of the most common stories about the origins of elves is when God asked to see all of Adam and Eve's children.
And in the more PC-friendly version, it is said that Eve was ashamed because she didn't have time to wash all her children, so she hid the ones away that she couldn't wash.
But in the more accurate version, she just couldn't be bothered to wash all of them because there were so many of them.
So she picked the ones she found the most beautiful and locked the ugly ones in a cave. And somehow God Almighty noticed that some children were missing. Perhaps he didn't have a problem counting to 7.
Or however many children they supposedly had.
Being ever vengeful, he says to Eve that because she had wanted to hide from God, he would make sure that the children would be hidden from her and Adam and all their descendants from here on in, except for a few chosen cuckoo people.
And they shall forever be useless. Always with the useless.
And now for the plausible explanation. A man was wandering alone when he got lost. He eventually found a small cottage, but he still didn't know where he was. So he knocked on the door and an old woman came to the door. She greeted him with a warm smile and invited him in. She took him to the living room where there were 2 young, beautiful girls. They also greeted him warmly. He saw that there was no one else there. The girls gave him food, which he was glad to accept, and when they offered him a bed to sleep in, he asked if he could sleep with one of them. And they just said yes. So he chose one of them and went to bed with her. He turned towards her and tried to put his arm around her, but he couldn't.
He then tried to grab her, but he felt nothing. He could see she was there, clear as day. So he asks, how can this be?
I am a soul without a body. When the devil rebelled in heaven and was eventually expelled, he and everyone who fought with him were banished into the darkness. And those who stood by and missed his presence were also expelled. But those who did nothing, either for or against him, were sentenced to live in the mountains and rocks down on earth. Those were to be called elves, and they could only live with their own kind. They could do good, or they could do evil. They would not get a physical body such as your own, but they can appear to you when they choose to do so. I am one of those fallen spirits, so you should not be surprised that you cannot enjoy me.
So the man said fair enough, turned to the other side and went to sleep. He later told everyone this story.
And that's why we believe in elves, I guess. Because we would rather do that than believe a young man would lie about not getting laid. So go ahead and share this video with your skeptic friends. This should go a long way convincing them that elves and hidden people just might exist.